Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at the Knowledge and Learning Commons. It's great to be here with you this afternoon or this morning if you're joining us from New York. A short video was just played showing the doors of the library and archives here at UN Geneva opening. So a big welcome to you. My name is Natalie. I work at the library for the Commons. If this is your first time here at the Commons, this is our space that's really dedicated to informal learning and also knowledge sharing on issues of both professional development and multilateralism. And today we're really excited because our partners for this session are speakers from the McKinsey Global Institute, as well as the New Work Global team. So as you can see, today's platform is WebEx events. Closed captions are available if you'd like to use those. You can select the CC button at the bottom left of your screen to activate them. And also you can change the closed captions into the language of your preference. To interact with you today, we're using a platform called Slido. You can see on the screen how to access that today. You can either scan the QR code on your phone, or you can also use your desktop and go to slido.com. The code to enter is future with a capital F. We'll remind you of that code as we go along. We'd really love to hear your questions throughout the session. And you can also vote for the ones that you'd like to have most answered. If you do have any technical questions for us, please submit a question here in the Q&A and we'll do our best to help you out. All of these substantive questions, however, we'll take over on Slido. So today we have a session that's really part of our Build Back Better series, where we discuss what we've kind of experienced through the pandemic, what we've learned, and how we can evolve as we move forward together. And our discussion today is a topic that's really quite critical to all of us as we see these huge changes and evolutions in our workplace. It's the future of work. We've got some great speakers here with us today, but before I introduce them to you, let's take a quick look at our learning objectives, which you'll find on the screen. We're going to look at the key shifts and trends for the future of work based on research and data from the McKinsey Global Institute. We'll also look at kind of how these shifts are propelling us forward in the long term. How do we leverage them to create a more flexible, engaged, kind of motivated workplace? And of course, we'll also discuss what this means for the UN, the organization for which we work, in terms of leadership, culture, and more. So guiding us today, we have our speakers here with us. Dr. Tilman Tacke is our keynote speaker today. He's an economist and partner at the McKinsey Munich office, which he joined in 2014, but also the McKinsey Global Institute, which he joined in 2018. He's advised a range of governments, development agencies, foundations, and also at the Global Institute, his research is leading with a thematic focus on the social contract, the economic aspects of the social contract, labor markets, and inequality. We also have with us representatives of the New Work Global team based in Geneva and New York, who will join us for the interactive Q&A session with you very soon. We have Daniela Woods. She's our Senior Coordination Officer for COVID here at UN Geneva, and also the Change Manager for New Work in Geneva. Joining us from New York is Liliana Urupuro. She's a Change and Project Management Officer in New York and is part of the New Work New York team. So a big thanks to all of our speakers for joining us. Last but not least, we have our substantive moderator today. He's our director here at the UN Library and Archives Geneva, Francesco Pisano. So a big thanks to you all for joining us, and also to our audience. Here at the Commons, our audience is really, really critical to us, and so we do want to hear your opinion and also your ideas on the future of work. So before we get started with our speakers, we do have a few questions we'd love for you to consider over on Slido. So let's take a look at those questions. If you joined just now, the code to join is future, capital F, and you can either scan the QR code that you see on the screen, or you can go to slido.com to enter that code. So our first question, what's challenging you in the working environment since the COVID outbreak? There'll be a word cloud that's going to appear on the screen, so it's good information perhaps for our speakers to know in just a few words, what has been perhaps the biggest challenge for you as you've experienced that? I think it's the question before, sorry Maria, we'll go back to the question before. There we go. What's challenging you in the working environment since the COVID outbreak? Perhaps it could be, technology overload, maybe too many meetings, divisions perhaps, and also how we kind of divide work and home life. I'll also take a little bit of a stab at that question. No free time, communication, too many meetings, work-life balance, lack of team cohesion, The biggest is coming up as too many meetings and overload so far. COVID itself, yeah, of course. Uncertainty, technology, telecommuting, unnecessary meetings, teamwork, challenges with teamwork as well. No informal communication, yeah. A lot of it now is formal meetings rather than catching up with colleagues perhaps more spontaneously. Great. Zoom fatigue, yeah. Constant change, okay. Also something perhaps we need to maybe address with our speakers, the pace of change that's happening in the workplace. Okay, how to separate work and life, family responsibilities, working hours. Okay, great. Thanks everybody for your answers there. The biggest ones you can see kind of in the text is the largest, so too many meetings. Maybe that's something we can ask our speakers for some tips as well, managing that as part of a team. Okay, great. Let's take a look at the next question. It requires perhaps a little bit more visioning. So how do you see the future of your own work in the next 5 years? Perhaps maybe you'd like to close your eyes for a moment or just take a breath and imagine yourself 5 years from now. What does your work kind of look like? How are you working? How's your team kind of organized? How is leadership looking like to you? Hybrid. Okay, hybrid format. Some are saying it should be home-based. Some are saying that it's actually quite isolating. More balanced, hopefully. But so far, the biggest answers are coming from the hybrid format. Relying on big data, so AI. Indirect oversight, I guess different formulations of leadership and teams. Less supervision. Hybrid, but in the sense of empowering each other. Okay. Mostly good, but also some comments there on perhaps being isolated or having less motivation. Okay, great. Thanks everyone for your contributions. Let's take a look at our final question, a little bit more relevant to, I guess, the culture here at the UN. So how would you describe the ideal culture of the UN as an organization? In just a few words. Perhaps quite similar to our vision of how we work 5 years from now. Solidarity, committed to our cause. Nice. Diverse, trusting managers, less hierarchy. Flat hierarchies. Advanced in technology, inclusive, respectful. Management by results. Participative. Hopeful. Walking the talk, less bureaucracy. Lots of results coming in. The biggest answer so far, the biggest answers are less hierarchy and inclusion, inclusivity. And now less bureaucracy. Great. Some great responses there. Okay, perhaps this is some food for thought for our speakers as we move on, inclusive being the biggest answer now in terms of our culture at the UN. Okay. Thank you everyone for being a part of that. You're welcome to keep submitting your answers and we'll make sure to save them and send them to you after the session. But I think that's enough for me. Let's head to our speakers. Over to you, Francesco.
Thank you so much, Natalie, and welcome to this space of knowledge sharing and learning, the KLC here at Library and Archives, UN Geneva. Thank you, first of all, to the speakers, but most of all, to all of you reaching out to us through screens, our audience. We are doing all of this for you. The future of work is something that is talked about in every corporation, every organization, every team of humans try to achieve something. Yet, it is something that doesn't obey predictions. From automation to robotics to artificial intelligence to COVID, every time we tried to predict the future of work, we got it wrong. And yet it moves, it changes over time, sometimes very slowly, sometimes like in the case of COVID, almost overnight. How big organizations like ours look at the future of work contributes to forming the culture of the organization itself, like someone constantly looking at his own or her own image in a mirror. But when we look at ourselves, we're only looking at a small part of what the future of work really means. That's why we call on McKinsey and one of the analysts and economists, Tilman Tacke, to give us a sense of what they are seeing from their observation deck that looks mainly at the private sector and how large corporations are reacting to the pandemic, but also to other big trends. And I have a set of questions for him so that he can enlighten us. And then we will go to a debate based on your question and answers. And this is where our colleagues from the Secretariat here in Geneva and in New York, working on main trends, cultural aspects of the work we do in the organization, will come in. So, Tilman, thank you so much for joining us. You're welcome here to the UN. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the friendly words. Thanks a lot for inviting me in the first place. I've actually spent the bulk of my career at McKinsey working in the public sector, including collaborations with the UN, and I admire the organization. I feel in a world where most of the problems are global organizations such as yours are the ones that are likely providing the solutions. So I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you so much.
No, most welcome. Francesco, you just said that I might enlighten you, and I think it's not possible for me, and it's also not needed, because when I looked at the answers that you gave to the 3 questions in the polls before, that's basically the answers. So if I go through my presentation, you'll see that everything that has mentioned, or most of the things that have been mentioned throughout these 3 questions, will come back in the presentation. So it's very much a situation where the solution is mostly within the organizations, and it's mostly about listening to the employers, what they want, what they feel is important, and following up on it, executing on it. But I don't want to jump to the conclusion right now before sharing some of the facts and findings and explaining how we think about the future of work.
Yeah, so let me get on with the first question that we prepared for you, and that question is, how will the future of work look like, and what are the shifts now and in the coming years that you can see based on the data? I'm looking at the audience now. Tilman is here because he owns a big data sets and analysis, and most of the time these kind of discussions are resting on nothing, just opinions. So that's why we called on him, and that's why he's got some slides to show us with hard facts and figures. Over to you.
Thanks a lot. Before going into the figures, let's start with a quick story out of my life. In 2018, Google gave a presentation, and they presented to the public what they call AI assistant, so an artificial intelligent assistant. And they, at a corporate presentation, they showed how the system could book a hairdresser appointment and how it could book a table at the restaurant. So it was an automated system talking to a human being in a restaurant at the hairdresser, making appointments. And it worked really well. Of course, otherwise they wouldn't have presented it. And I thought, that's marvelous. So that's going to help us to address some of the problems that we have and that were also stated in your questions. Overload, too many meetings. And I called on, I talked to my assistant, and I showed her the video telling her, so that's a solution to some of our problems, because you need to make a lot of appointments. Here is a technology that's coming in that can take over some of these tasks and free you up for other tasks, or just give you more free time. What happened is that my assistant 6 months later quit the job and said that what was important for her to quit the job was looking at the Google video, because she felt she's working in a business, or she's working in an occupation that's actively threatened by technology. So she quit the job and she went into a job that is more sheltered, a job that has more interpersonal relations and meetings that are less likely to be automated. So that's the story to start with on the future of work. When we talk about the future of work, what we're talking about is, in general, trends shaping the labor market. but at the core of it being automation and artificial intelligence. So basically technology replacing human tasks. And while it is coined future of work, it's something that we've been talking about for 10 years at least, and it is describing something that's happening right now. So future of work is not what is happening in 2030, but future of work is playing out already since quite a long time. Just to give an example, in banking, future of work used to be moving from when you needed cash to go from a bank teller to going to an ATM. So that was technology already replacing people working in retail banking. Now the next step is that you don't need cash anymore. So if you want to pay, you're not using ATMs, which are still managed by people who have to put the money in, who have to service the apparatus. It's now a pure technology. So it's something that's been going on that most people say is accelerating. And now I'm coming to facts. It is something that is increasingly affecting all of us, albeit to a different degree. So what we did is we looked at the major occupations that we have in our global economy, and we dissected them into tasks. And we were talking about roughly 2,000 tasks. And for those 2,000 tasks, we were looking which of them can already today be replaced by technology. And what you get is the following picture here. So this chart shows you what degree of activities could be automated with, that was, I think, 2016 technology. And you see that there are jobs that can be fully automated, 100% sewing machine operators, and there are some jobs where very little, small share of the tasks will be replaced by technology. Overall, about 60% of the occupations have around at least 30% of tasks that can be automated. So automation is something that's affecting all of us, but not to a major degree. And that's also that was the example with my assistant. What I thought is there's a technology that's coming in that's going to help you to do a job in more efficient. But there's also, of course, some jobs where technology might replace or is already actively replacing the entire job. That's back to the banking retail sector, or also then the people who are putting cash into the ATMs. So it's something that's affecting all of us, but to a varying degree. Now, the way that that the future of work and automation is talked about is often a threat. So I don't know who of you have read the books by Yuval Harari. He talks about the emergence of the useless class, meaning a lot of people who will no longer be needed in our labor market, where technology is taking over their jobs and they're just not required to get our economy working anymore. What we argue by looking at the development over the last 20 years and by looking into technology and the tasks is that at least for the next 10 years, that's not likely to be the case. Very differently, we think that over the next 10 years, what will happen is not that we will run into a situation where we have mass unemployment as a phenomenon that is emerging. Let me show you some facts around it. So if you just take the longer term trends pre-COVID and you look at where the employment rate was going, so the share of the population that was working, and you know that automation has been playing out over the past decades already, what you would expect is that the employment rate goes down. The technology is taking over and less human beings are working. But the reverse is true. Our economies are providing more employment opportunity per working age population than ever before. That was true before COVID, and it will most likely, according to, for example, OECD statistics, be true in a year or in 2 years again. So it's not that we're in a situation where we're heading towards mass unemployment because technology is taking over. No, we're in an economy where more opportunities are available than before. But what is happening, and that's the right-hand side of this slide, is that those opportunities are unequally distributed. So you have a high share of the new jobs that are being offered by the economy are requiring higher educational backgrounds. Those are high-wage jobs, higher educational background, and also for low-wage jobs, there has been an increase in employment opportunities. But if you look at the middle, there is a segment of our labor market where fewer and fewer opportunities have been arising. Now, of course, if you look at the picture and you see 7% fewer opportunities in the middle, but the bulk of it goes towards higher wages, that's not a negative development. So you would say that's good. That's opportunities for people to skill themselves, to have higher salaries. But of course, a significant share also of people that might have done middle wage jobs now has to do lower wage jobs. And that's a problem that you see also in the political debate being very strong. So it's not mass unemployment, but it's an uneven distribution of jobs. And when I say an uneven distribution, it's not just by skills or wage category, it is also by location. So when you look at this slide, that's just work we've done on Europe. We've done it in the US as well. What you see on this slide is Europe broken down in, I think 1,200 regions. And each region is colored according to the number of jobs that we believe will be created in addition or will be fewer available over the next 10 years. And you see a very, very polarized picture. You see a lot of red regions, but you also see a lot of blue regions. And in general, what you see is that the regions that over the past 10, 15 years have already gained in employment the most are the most ones that will attract the most jobs in the future as well. So there is a local concentration of jobs in a few regions. And that goes just to the same notion as before. There are more opportunities, but they're unevenly distributed. We're seeing a more polarized labor market, both in terms of the wage levels that jobs offer, but also in terms of the locations where these jobs will be available. However, of course, this picture would be devastating if people wouldn't react. Then you would see big parts of Eastern Germany, very high unemployment rates, a lot of discontent, huge parts of Poland, of Bulgaria, southern Italy, Portugal, being really in a miserable situation. And that is not what is likely to happen, because what this chart shows is the number of jobs, how they will develop. And of course, people are reacting in their way. And they are reacting by migration, most importantly, but also because of aging and because of variances in birth rates. There's an almost natural matching of job opportunities in these regional markets. So what is also part of the future of work is the labor supply. So our skills, how many of us are there, whether we're willing to work more or fewer hours in the future. And if you take that into consideration and you look at the same regional labor markets, the picture that you get is a very different one. It's a blue picture, meaning that in almost all regions, per person at working age, there will be more opportunities available than today. And that is, again, back to the old notion. It's not that automation is likely to cause a lot of unemployment over the coming years. It is more likely that because of some restrictions that we have due to aging and preferences to lower working hours, that there will be in almost all regional labor markets more opportunities available per person living in that region. What is changing? What is changing significantly? So you have the geographic imbalance that I talked about, that there's a concentration of job growth in a few regions, however labor supply is reacting to it. There's another change that will happen and that we also already see outplaying over the last 10 years, which is that different skills will be required in the economy. So what you see here is the skills that were required in the 2018 economy in billion hours in Europe, including UK and Switzerland. So the by far biggest bulk were physical and manual skills, 159 billion hours, and then you have the smallest technological skills. Now, if you forecast how our labor markets are changing in terms of the occupation that we will have more of and less of, that picture is changing. You see physical and manual skills go down, 80 billion hours. Basic cognitive skills, that's probably booking a table or making an appointment by phone, also fewer hours. And you see the other three skill categories, higher cognitive, higher social and emotional skills, and higher technological skills increasing. So when we talk about the future of work and long-term trends, then what we have predominantly in mind are the two imbalances. The one imbalance between the regions, like different regions see different job growth. And in the past, that has we've matched it by people moving from one place to the other, but we also know that the cities that have offerings of most of the jobs are getting very expensive. So we're talking about Geneva, where some of you are, definitely New York, London, Paris, the usual suspects. So maybe that migration movement towards where the jobs are is no longer as easily possible as it was in the past. And then we talk about the skill shift. So the future labor market demanding different skills than the present labor market does. It has to be said that if we look at the basic categories, work might get a little more interesting by requiring higher cognitive skills, social emotional skills, technological skills, rather than like basic physical skills. What I've described so far is the longer term trends that we see in the labor markets that we would label future of work. Of course, now in 2021, you can't talk about longer term trends ending in 2018 without mentioning what happened during the COVID experience. And we tried to study and assess in a moving development how COVID is impacting the future of work and the trends that I described. And we see basically three things that are now different or accelerated compared to what we expected before COVID. And they all relate to a new development that is further fostering how our economies are changing. And that is, during COVID, the need to limit physical contact. That was nothing that before changed the economy. Nobody was thinking through, I need to change my operations in a company in order to avoid physical contact. But during COVID, it became a primary concern. And some of the measures that companies took, and also the public sector took, are likely to stick. So three big trends that we believe will stick. First one, remote work. We saw it in your survey before, hybrid remote working model. That's something that's likely to continue, and business travel will go down, also due to climate considerations. And my occupation is one where we feel it the strongest. We were traveling so much, and for the UN, that's true as well. And a lot of it has been replaced by technology, by Zoom, without a big decrease in quality in many cases. In some, it feels different, but in some cases, it is a good replacement. So remote work as opposed to traveling. Second one, e-commerce and also telemedicine. Some technology has been developed that was actually very welcome and would be welcome also outside the COVID context. And we believe that these accelerations and, for example, e-commerce penetration will continue. And then the third point is a more general point, automation adaptation. That's something that you see also during crisis in the past, great financial crisis, a lot of jobs reduced and few jobs coming back that can be replaced by technology. So there it's just accelerating the development. So if you go back to the two challenges that are described in the future of work, these two mismatches, geographic mismatch as well as skill mismatch, what we believe has changed during COVID is that for the geographic mismatch with the broad acceptance of remote working, Zoom technology, WebEx, whatever we're using, there is a solution that is now much more prominent than we thought before COVID. And at the same time, in the skill mismatch, because automation accelerated and also because technology usage accelerated. So for example, e-commerce, more e-commerce means less traditional commerce, means fewer jobs in retail shops and a few additional jobs in technology companies. That means that the reskilling challenge that we have is likely to be bigger in the future than we expected before COVID. So that summarized our perspective on future of work and how labor markets are changing.
Thank you very much, Tilman. And I enjoyed the story of your collaborator or assistant that actually left. And that brings me to the second dimension of this that I wanted to explore with you, which is, the flip side of what your assistant did is basically the capacity of organization to retain talents or simply retain people that work. Now, one of the things that COVID brought about, that was quite seismic, was the number of people, the percentage of people that are actively thinking of changing jobs is overwhelming. It's over 60%. So I wanted to ask you this specifically. What are the things that large organizations, for example, the UN, if you have insights for us, should do or could do to retain people, not only talents, but people, in a context that is shifting so rapidly, also due to the factors that you just highlighted?
Yeah, very good question, Dee. So I think in general, what the situation that the private sector is facing is probably quite comparable to what's happening in the public sector. And when we're working with the private sector, there's usually 4 topics that we're working on in order to help them to remain attractive. And that's especially important for people where a high share of the workforce are people with higher educational background, because that's the category, those are the people where we believe that more and more opportunities will be available in the future. So it's a scarce resource, and retaining those people is going to be critical for organizations to remain operational, stay effective, grow, whatever the objectives are. So what we say is that, of course, after COVID, you shouldn't just go back to where we were before COVID, because so many things have changed. A, we have these longer term trends that have accelerated, but B, we also have a very specific COVID experience that just requires employers to react. And the 4 topics that those are working on also resonate well with what was mentioned as responses to the questions that we had initially. Is first, where do we work? So what is a potential distribution to a hybrid operating model? It goes back to what I said earlier. We have a geographic mismatch of people and jobs. And of course, if you have a hybrid working model or even remote working model, that allows you as an employer to tap into labor supply sources that you couldn't tap into before because you were bound to the office locations. But it is also something that's extremely important to individuals as they see advantages in hybrid operating models, because it allows them to stay home, because it allows them to minimize time spent in travel and other things. So that's one of the important topics. How is the new opportunity of remote working through technology? How will we institutionalize that in a post-COVID state? The second one is one that relates very much to the COVID experience, because not everything was wrong during COVID. COVID's also in just normal jobs. In our organization, for example, what we did when COVID broke out is we had to react very quickly to redistribute certain tasks, to distribute tasks that we didn't have in the past, about, I don't know, hygiene measures, for example. And it actually worked very well. Enabled by technology, we were able to quickly reallocate talents, to find a communication form that was not really hierarchical, and also to come to much quicker decision makings than we were used to in the past. So that's something where the good parts of the COVID experience will stick to the mind of employees, and organizations should ask themselves, what of it can we retain in the post-COVID world? The third one is one that more connects to these longer term trends that I was talking about. What are the skills that we need in the future in an even accelerated change of the labor market? But that's something that has been top of the mind of most organizations in the private sector, at least for the last years as well. The fourth topic is again one that was reflected very much in the survey at the beginning. It is, what is the culture that we need? So what is the culture that we need in order to retain our talent? So it's mentioned here: diversity, equity, inclusion, adaptability. So people believe that while COVID is hopefully a once in a lifetime experience, we're in a structurally more volatile economic environment, and we will need to live with more changes in the future due to technology, due to fluctuations in the economy, and we'll need to embrace a more adaptable working culture. And then diversity, equity, and inclusion are things that have been on the agenda of companies in the past, but are now becoming much more important, also due to the COVID experience, which for many people wasn't very positive and didn't feel inclusive at all. And then lastly, what the COVID experience brought about, and what we're experiencing right now while talking to each other, is that partnerships outside your own organization are much easier now than they were in the past. So in the past, you're talking to people right next door to you. You just walk over, or you meet them over coffee. And now you're meeting people by click, and it doesn't matter as much or it doesn't matter at all if you click whether the other person is in a different organization or is in your organization. So it's an environment where an open culture, and a culture that allows for partnerships with external, often more specialized and maybe more efficient operators in certain spaces, would overall improve the working culture in your organization. So those are the 4 topics that in general companies are working on. of course, what I try to think through is how are these topics relevant in the UN experience? And I'm really looking forward to the debate that we're having later on. But I think if we just go through these 4 categories, I do believe that there's more opportunity than challenge to the UN going forward. So when I think about the first one, where do we work? I think the new technology and the acceptance of the technology of remote working is extremely valuable, especially for global corporations with global footprints. So if I think about knowledge sharing, that's much easier now and much more acceptable that you just talk to somebody at the other side of the globe who might have faced the same problem, and now you're exchanging about solutions that might be working in your situation as well. So I think there it's definitely an opportunity for organizations such as the UN. Now, how we work, I don't want to talk about the way the UN works because I don't really know it, but I know that in general, the public sector clients I've worked with, and if I compare them to private sector clients, were often described by organizations that are not as flexible, where hierarchy is not as flat, where decision-making might take a little longer. So again, the experience of COVID has shown that even in those organizations, it is possible that you have a flat hierarchy. It is possible that you can reach conclusions and take decisions much faster. And that hopefully sets an example for the future as well. Then the skill shift. I believe in an organization as the UN, with probably mostly people with advanced educational background, is probably nothing that will be dramatically different than it was before COVID, but I might be wrong on that one. And I believe the last topic, the topic on culture, which was very prominent in how you described the future of work that you want to live in the survey at the beginning, that is a challenge because of some of the things that I said about how we work. So the classical public sector topics about high administrative loads, often low lead times for decision makings. But it is also something that might develop very much in favor of an organization such as the UN, because a lot of people are longing for purpose in what they do. And I think that's something that's hopefully little questioned if you're working for an organization such as the UN.
Yeah, that is very true. That leads me actually to my last question, but I would like to ask you to be extremely brief because we have run out of time for this portion and we don't want to sacrifice, we never sacrifice the debate. Even if you are our invited keynote speaker, we never sacrifice the debate time. But this contribution you're giving us would not be complete without touching upon the magic word of leadership. Leadership, the word that everybody says and the thing that nobody sees. And so what do you see out there when you look at the future, COVID, with and without COVID? What is really, in 60 seconds, the major trends in how leadership is changing?
So in 60 seconds, what I would say is what is changing, first of all, is not how leadership is working, because we've given them little lead time. Now we're still during COVID, and we'll need to see how they will react. But what is very, very clear is that employees are reacting. So there's what we call now the great attrition is happening. 40% of the people are thinking about leaving their job, and many of them, of the people who've left over the past month, have left without a new opportunity. So it's not that they have a better job, but it's just that they're leaving their job. And that relates to some future of work trends, but also the COVID experience. And what we believe management needs to do now, and I would show for 30 seconds a slide, is they first of all need to understand why people are reacting in such a way. So why is it in an environment where for high-skilled people, opportunities are abundant, and we're coming out of COVID and you could just continue working in a similar fashion as you did before, people suddenly decide to leave in very large numbers. And what I will show you here is hope you can see it, is the results, the surveys that we've done. We've asked employees, but we've also asked employers what they think is, what is more important for them in their current job, or what will be more important in the future. What you see is that there's a dramatic mismatch between what managers believe or companies believe will be more important to their employees than what they think themselves. So here, what you see is this is what employers, it should say employers are believing is more important or most important in the future to their employees. And it has things like inadequate compensation, something that's bringing them away, looking for a better job, poor health. But in reality, if you look at what the individuals themselves are saying, those that have left, what they wanted to have more of is not more money, or is not looking for a better job. It is that they want to be valued. They want to have a sense of belonging. They want to be valued by their manager. So that would be my response to your question. What is it that managers need to be different? A, they need to understand why people are not happy right now and why so many are thinking about leaving. And then B, most likely the solution is not that they want to have a higher pay or want to feel that they are engaged in a better transaction, but that they want to be valued, that they want to be taken serious and respected as an individual. And I think that's good news to all of us, because who doesn't want to be respected and seen as an individual, and who doesn't want to have a boss who responds to our individual needs?
Thank you for this data. They make a lot of sense, and it's very good to see them that way. Thank you so much. There will be time during the question and answers for you to come back, but I'm happy that you were able to show all the figures that you brought. And your last one says thank you, but actually it's for us to say thank you to you. Thank you so much for taking the time of condensating your analysis work for us today. Natalie, how are we doing on Slido? I would like really to open this. We have half an hour, a little bit less than half an hour now, to really have a discussion among ourselves. The audience of our commons is diplomats, it's staff, is an interns. There are people who are committed to the success of our organization. So this is the place where we can have a discussion and question and answers. We have 3 experts here. This is your time to learn more and exchange a little bit. Keep your questions, please, to the point so that we can answer them. Slido is a smart system. Natalie, over to you.
Thanks, Francesco. Great. So we do have a few questions already on Slido. If you have joined us kind of midway through the session, you still have time to ask questions. So you can join at slido.com. The code is on the screen, it's future, or you can just scan the QR code using your mobile device. But let's take a look at some of the questions coming in. Maybe we'll begin with kind of looking at the technologies that Tilman mentioned, as well as kind of the soft skills or emotional skills that he was also mentioning. So what technologies / skills do you think can help us be agile and have flatter hierarchies at the UN? Back to you, Francesco, to moderate that.
Yeah, sure. So I would like to start by bringing in Daniela and Liliana, because after all, they've been working with hundreds of colleagues around the organization and across the organization, both in New York and in Geneva, and in duty stations away from both New York. So and Geneva, we're a global organization. So that I will bring them first into the debate so that our audience can hear the voices and also the experience they have accumulated during their work. So over to you. Whoever wants to start first. Let's start from the furthest away. Maybe Liliana, you're joining us in New York. And we are all in Europe. So over to you first.
Thank you, Francesco, and thanks to Tilman for the insightful presentation. It certainly raised a few questions, and also I think some things I'd like to challenge. But first, in terms of this, the things that we've really seen people developing as they, work on new work projects and volunteer. New Work is a staff-driven initiative, and a lot of the people working on this are, in fact, volunteers. This isn't officially a part of their TOR or job description. They are just motivated to make a change, to improve our workplace culture. And the kinds of skills we're seeing is communications, empathy, creativity in particular. You have to be very creative to come up with solutions with no resources. And I think we've seen quite a lot of that. It's so important, I think, and this ties in with what Tilman was saying about the social and cognitive skills increasing. Also technology, before COVID, people were a bit slow to adopt new technologies and such. And suddenly they realized they had to for COVID, and one of the things they're often grateful to is the extra support that they got, from New Work Network, to learn the tools, not just the standard tools, also Teams, but other tools that, we've been using for online collaboration and such that perhaps have not yet been standardized, because it is very difficult to keep up with all of this. But I do just want to sort of emphasize, that technology is not the solution. We have a habit of kind of throwing technology at every problem. But really, we've been trying to focus on mindset, on behaviors, on the people aspects, and what people can contribute to this process of change. And then, the solution, once you really fully understand the problem and the issue, then you can find a solution that focuses on the people, that's human-centered. And so I think those are the types of things that we're learning, to be adaptive versus technical.
Yeah, Liliana, you mentioned a few skills. So yeah, the question is, what social skills do you think will be necessary? You mentioned a few. I wonder if Daniela want to come in and tell us your take. Do you have other skills to mention for our audience that put that question? And also, if you can touch a little bit on question 3 there that you see. Sorry, it's gone away. The question on the technology and the skills that we need with regard to the technology move, because this is also a discussion that we had in New Work before the appearance of COVID. Daniela, what do you think?
Thank you so much, Francesca. And also I wanted to say it's a really exciting debate, and what I hear and the questions that I see, they're so relevant. That's exactly the kinds of things that we're considering in New Work. What I wanted to say is now it's really important that we all become really good at networking and building relationships with our colleagues. We are such a global organization, and together we make this change happen. So what we always emphasize in New Work is really, it's a global network, and it doesn't matter what your function is, where you're sitting in the organization. What matters is that we all come around the table and we believe in the same thing. And one of the things that we want to achieve is indeed a flatter hierarchy. And there's no particular skill here that you can learn. I mean, you can learn about the agile mindset. An agile mindset makes an organization less hierarchical if all, adhere to it. But most important, it's really how you, interact with your colleagues and what you bring to the table. And again, we're really pushing the envelope that it's not about your level, it's about the function. So we really, and that we all are more proactive and dare to take risks in our work and just demand, like, I have a good idea, I'm going to share it and see what happens. Sometimes we think we are restrained, but maybe we're not if we try. And on the technology piece, I really think it's, I've heard a lot from colleagues that people are afraid that we're falling back to the way they were before. And in terms of technology, that could mean, for example, instead of using Teams, going back to some more paper-based. But I think it's not going to happen. This has been strong. It's been a long experience with COVID, where we all had to learn how to use things like Teams. And we all realized what the advantages are, for example, that it's much more inclusive and we can just add a person to a meeting. It's just more flexible. So I'm more positive on that one. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Daniela, because that partly answers, it answers a lot the question on what technology and skills do you think can help us to be agile. That has 3 likes, but there is one that has 5 likes, and I care a lot also about this. So I would like to have all the 3 of you in one sentence tell the audience, what do you think would improve communication between employers and employees? And be concrete, because there are tricks that we have seen during COVID emerging, how employers, basically heads or service leaders or managers, had to show up in a virtual workspace in a completely different way. And so each of you, one sentence, how can this be improved? Tilman, you go first.
I think first it's about communication happening in the first place. Often you have top management talking among themselves in the past, and nothing really being communicated to the broader base of employees. And that's changing dramatically now, with people getting used at very frequently to communicate throughout the entire organization.
Good point. Liliana.
I would say it's about engagement, which is, again, another skill that we need to improve. You need to engage everyone. And some sort of practical ways of doing this, for example, is including a check-in question in your team meetings to make sure everyone gets to speak, rotating roles in your team meetings. What, you know, the team leader, the senior person doesn't always have to lead. You can allow junior staff to lead as well. Have different people taking notes. You know, why is it always the junior woman taking notes? All of these ways, you know, to improve engagement and inclusivity in your teams will go a long way.
Good point. Daniela.
Really to build trust and to be interested, to have trusting relationships, because then communication can flow more freely. And also to be really, especially for the leaders, to be really interested in a two-way channel, a two-way communication, and really listen. And it's this, you have to create a safe space for the team. So as for example, the manager at the management level, you have to build this trust and have a safe space for the team so that everybody feels empowered and comfortable to actually share their opinion. And it's really important that everybody is heard.
And there you go with one thing that actually we all tend to forget, especially people who lead teams, that communicating is mostly about listening, actually. It's not about emitting sounds to direct it to others. I like that very much. Thank you, Daniela, for bringing this particular point up. I would like to go to this question on automation. This question is important. It got 2 likes, but I remember that before COVID, a large number of our colleagues in conference services were really worried about what automation would mean for their work categories in the future. So, Daniela, since you spoke the last, maybe on this one, from your experience as a change manager and also as a new work founding partner, how do you think automation will affect really the work of all of us in the organization?
So I think that more affected will be the service provider sides of the UN. So your conference management, your classic administration. But this means that we actually will free up room for some persons that were, you know, busy with some tasks that can be taken over by automation, and they then have the time to focus on more meaningful processes, and that could mean find better ways of doing certain things. For example, in the medical insurance here in Geneva, we have automated, you know, the comparing what comes in through a claim and what goes out. Like, it's a simple thing that can be done. And this just means that the staff members working in the medical insurance literally have more time to improve the client service and others. So it doesn't mean that people might be out of the job. It really means that when we have places where we have a lot of tasks, we can really focus on, you know, the other tasks at hand.
Yeah. Liliana, you have the perspective from New York. Now, New York and Geneva are sisters, but they're not the same. They're not twins. So what do you see in New York that we don't see here in Geneva regarding the relationship between automation and work at the UN Secretariat that we can see just behind you in the photo in the background?
Yeah, so I think, you know, well, I saw another question at one point as well that said that automation can't really fully replace humans. And I think, you know, obviously everywhere in the UN, we're dealing with delegates and member states. But, you know, it's those people relationships, you know, the networking that was mentioned earlier, that's so important as a skill set. And that's something that's always going to continue. And, you know, in New York, we're very, very much impacted on a daily basis by that support to member states, the interaction to member states. And that's something that is not going to be automated. And so I fully agree with Daniela, you know, that, you know, some activities can be automated, and hopefully those people can be freed to work on these creative projects, you know, to deal with the people aspects of the organization, which is so important, because it's not just the member states as well, right? We have our beneficiaries out in the field as well. And and those relationships are also important.
Yeah, I see an interesting question with two legs. So basically, to turn it around, if we cannot fire or pay less these old people, how do we make them learn new tricks? I would like to hold that one. This is an important question. I don't want to hide it. I want us to answer that question. But before, I wanted to take advantage of Tilman's presence here. Maybe you could give our audience the definition of what is hybrid work and remote work, because there is a lot of confusion. Now, I know that remote work means when I'm working basically all the time away from the office. I might require an office a couple of times a month, but I'm a remote worker. But people lack these fundamental definitions. Would you be ready to give them to us?
I think I would just say what you said. Remote is permanently work from home, and home can be at your home or can be elsewhere, but it's not in the office. And then a hybrid setup is one where you at times go into the office, but then spend also significant share working from elsewhere.
And then we have flexible. Flexible is any mix of the two, right? I understand a hybrid environment as a working space where some people are physically present and others are connected through a device. So that's hybrid. So managing teams remotely, hybrid mode is a challenge. Of course, we know that, but maybe the three of you have tips, just hot from the front line of the discussion. Let's start with you, Tilman. Do you have any tips on how to make this hybrid mode? So we are three in an office, and then there is a screen, another three colleagues are on that screen, and we're having a leadership meeting to determine our next communication strategy, turning point. What are the tips there?
Well, I think key is to divide the tasks into tasks that you can do remotely without any quality issues, and then other tasks that you need to do in person. So, for example, analyzing, processing information, performing administrative tasks, updating knowledge and learning, things like that can be done from anywhere. You don't really need physical presence in the same location. Whereas other things like negotiation, training people, brainstorming, coaching, and mentoring are things that you need to do, or that are done at a much higher quality if you're at the same location as the other person. So I think it is about thinking about an occupation and dividing into tasks which can be done remotely without any quality issues, and others that should be done in the office, and then organizing calendars accordingly. So there are certain days where you then go in the office, and there's a routine that everyone goes in the office for certain tasks, and other tasks can just be done remotely.
Yeah, Liliana, this makes sense to me. This is the basic approach to it. When you look at the reality in New York, do you have other tips that you may add for our colleagues who are listening, for example, for New York itself?
Well, New York, we're quite widespread, and we have a lot of people who live actually quite far away from the office, and so this opportunity to be able to work remotely has improved work-life balance for many, particularly if you have a family or you're caring for a sick elderly loved one, and I think it's also served to motivate people because they're spending less time commuting, and so they do now have some time to volunteer and to work on initiatives such as New Work and to contribute to improving the organization. And I certainly hope, I mean, from what we're hearing from our leadership, they're certainly supportive of continuing that. And so we are just exploring ways to make sure that it's a bit more sort of standardized. I don't want to say we're exactly the same across departments, but certainly different departments have different needs. But we just want to make sure that staff across all of the departments in New York are able to continue benefiting from what we've seen during COVID. And we are preparing teams to sort of transition to that hybrid. We are all back one day a week in the office, some people more if they want to. And so we're sort of experimenting and practicing new techniques for working in that hybrid mode that we'll be sharing with others, and also with globally. We're happy to share that information and the lessons learned with everyone.
Okay, thank you for that, Liana. Daniela, we have heard from Liliana more the benefit side. So this wave of changes brought some benefit to a workforce that is widespread in the state of New York, or maybe even further. But going back to the tips, if I'm a manager and I decide that this task is going to be done by a hybrid team in a hybrid, basically, work mode, what can you recommend to me so that I make it more efficient, not necessarily more beautiful to look at, but more efficient, that it really works?
I would say this really depends on every team. What's the sense of connectedness? What was the sense of connectedness of the team members before this happens and now when it goes into the hybrid? If you find, for example, that in your team, some feel less connected than others, then you will need to work on the sense of connectedness by also including some informal activities, even that can be done remotely. In terms of meetings, it's also up to the teams to decide if, for example, some people are in the office and others are working remotely. Some teams might prefer to continue with fully remote meetings, meaning they all meet in MS Teams, because then you don't have the issue that some feel excluded when others are sitting in the conference room, in a meeting room and talking side. So it's a very tricky issue. And this issue indeed is we see that it's going to be tricky for a lot of managers, for a lot of teams. And that's why we actually developed a training here in Geneva on how to manage hybrid teams and what to do. And basically, we give managers the chance to get together and really exchange tips. One thing that I think works well also for team connectedness, at least based on our experience, is the huddles technique. The 15 minutes quick meetings every day to check in, to really give you the chance to check in with everyone, because it's really important to know where's everyone at, to get a sense what needs to be done.
So huddles meeting, taking care of the specificity of the teams with respect to the task. And you mentioned a training course. So for people who are interested, can you just tell us where to go and grab this training?
This is going to be advertised on CLM again in Inspire. I think we have the next one coming up soon in mid-November. So we can certainly share this information. And also it will be always included in the newsletter that we send regularly.
Okay, so for people in the Secretariat, heads up, the next iteration of this course is coming up. There is also resources that Liliana is sharing on the chat right now with the link for you. Now, we have 7 minutes to go, more or less. So I wanted to touch upon this question, which is important, how to teach old dogs new tricks. And I'm going to start with an experience that I have. I'm a director of a division with 81 people. And what is striking me is especially what is called in change management jargon, intergenerationality. And that means that for the first time in my working experience, the oldest guy, it's a guy, yes, in the organization is basically largely inside the last part of the baby boom generation. And the youngest is basically Generation Z. Mind you, people who are younger than 25. And I find this wonderful because when you put this array of knowledge, feelings, perspectives, and mindsets together, you have the ultimate combat machine to shoot problems. And I really like to use that. And I play less positions and more skills. So my answer is this: to encourage long-serving staff, basically all the older people among us, to do that is to put them in the pool of intergenerational exchange. First, they may feel a little bit cold and a little bit agitated, but actually it really works. So that is my token of wisdom. But then I wanted to bring in Tilman and ask him about this question, because he mentioned this in his presentation, how new skill, the reskilling issue. This is another term that with COVID became very popular. So Tilman, how you do reskilling in large organizations like ours?
Well, so that's a general question to the this challenge around leadership. I think in general, the what is problematic? So if I talk to my colleagues about the great attrition, and they tell me what they believe the main problem is, they talk about people with an outdated leadership style, so what they call toxic leaders. And of course, in the private sector, you have much more flexibility to handle such situations than in the public sector. So I do believe it is a problem. On the other hand, every leader wants to be valued by their teams as well. So often it's not by bad intention that people are behaving in a certain way, but that's the way they've been brought up. That's the culture that they've developed into when they were at the beginning of their career. So I do believe that, or I do hope that training and also creating transparency about how certain leadership style is received at the receiving end will hopefully change some of the leaders that you would consider nowadays to be not very flexible and be vested in a leadership style that's no longer valuing younger colleagues and maybe even driving them away from the organization.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's not an easy problem to tackle. We must recognize that. Now, there is a question there highlighted. What can we do to reskill, to prepare for these changes? Now, the changes are happening now. I look at Liliana and Daniela, maybe Daniela first. I remember participating in a dialogue with you, open to all staff, and we were juggling with these questions. We were really trying to answer, what does it mean for us? How do we focus on reskilling? Any insights there to answer this question?
For me, it's really to be proactive when you seek learning. There's so much offered in the UN in terms of you can take a networking course, for example. Networking is a really important skill. You can participate in new work and learn about the agile methodology. You can learn about human-centered design. So it's really, for me, again, it's more of a mindset. There's no many particular skills, but it's the mindset of being willing to do continuous learning and really also look at your area of work and look at what can you do differently every day. We really believe innovation is not like a small team somewhere in the corner. No, innovation is all of us. Every day when we do our work, to stay motivated to look at it differently and see what you can do. I think this goes a long way. And there, I don't see a big need to reskill in any particular area.
Okay, but you do see this new attention for reskilling, and it's a need across the organization. Okay. Tilman, I don't know that the UN is a flat hierarchy. I know for a fact it doesn't. But from your perspective, how do large corporations, the corporations you looked at, went from a pyramidal hierarchy to a flat hierarchy? Do you have examples of that transition, how that transition happens, and where are the driving forces of that change?
Yeah, so the two examples. One is what we call agile teams. During the pandemic, not only by us, but by many companies and also in the public sector, small teams were set up, and these teams often included people from very different levels of the hierarchy, and they would spend a significant share of their time together. So it's not that there's cascading information via hierarchy levels, but they were all together and all bounded by technology, sitting and discussing in the same meetings. So I think that's one example. And the other example is hierarchy is often something that mostly relates to our perception. You're all sitting in the room, and 5 minutes later, the big boss comes in. Everyone looks at the person, how he moves to, or she moves to the seat at the biggest table. And if you look at the technology that we're using nowadays, all of us have the same time. Now we're all like that, and we all appear at the same time. So even by just how we are represented in the way that we're collaborating, it makes it a flatter hierarchy because we all look similar.
Yeah, this is true. This is changing a lot. We also saw it in our own work lives in the Secretariat, and also with diplomats, that holding meetings on video is much more horizontal as an experience. I wonder, we have no minutes left because this is 5:10. But just one thing to bring in for the last time, Daniela and Liliana. I am not a mobility expert, but I think we should not skirt this question. Either of you or both of you have insights and views on why it's so hard for the UN to embrace this cross-sectoral mobility?
just briefly, our regulatory framework in HR is so complex and cumbersome, and it makes it really hard to even do this. But I've been part of quite a few discussions of the HR interagency network, for example, in Geneva, where they all agree that we should make this easier, and they're trying, but often it comes up with the administrative hurdle, unfortunately. But I think people are really trying and more pushing for this. And hopefully soon we will have an easier way to have cross-sectoral mobility, because I agree it is so important.
Let's hope. Big organizations, big rule books, right? This is something that happens not only in the UN, but everywhere. Liliana, do you want to add to this?
Well, I just think just in terms of mobility, just in general, we can find ways to do it more flexibly. I mean, through volunteer, through being able to participate in projects, through temporary assignments. And I just want to raise a point that I think hasn't quite come up. We've talked a lot about reskilling and everything, and our G staff, are a really untapped resource. The point was raised earlier about UN having advanced degrees. Even our G staff have advanced degrees, and they're often, human automatons, copy machines, fax machines, and that's an area where we could potentially, untap a lot of skills, and reskilling them and tapping into that great resource that we have, because so many of them really do have talent and skills to share and contribute to the organization. And so I hope that, even again, the G2P, that's another ceiling, much like this mobility, where the regulatory framework just doesn't let us do it. But, if we can informally, have programs for G staff to participate and be more empowered, I think it would be a huge benefit to the organization and to our workforce.
Yeah, and that's a point that the Secretary General underlined when he came in, and he constantly underlined through his public appearances at town halls. So thank you for bringing it up. The time is up. I'm aware that not all the questions went answered, but that was not our mission. Our mission was to discuss some of these key aspects and to bring you the expertise of Tilman and the experience and voices of Daniela and Liliana. And that mission, as far as I'm concerned, is accomplished. So over to you, Natalie.
Thank you, Francesco. Thanks to all of our speakers. That was super interesting. I really appreciated all of your time. So we do have to go. We've only got a few minutes left, but we just wanted to share with you a few resources that we have. We have a research guide for this particular event. Here you'll find more information about new work. You'll also find the McKinsey Global Institute research on the future of work and a few other resources. So check that out. We'll also put it in the chat for you as well. You can also follow us. You can subscribe to the newsletter to be able to come to the Commons every month and find out what's happening straight in your inbox. We actually do have an event next week that we do invite you to, still kind of on the idea of the future of work. We have a speaker coming from Microsoft on new ways to be more accessible and also productive and inclusive. On Teams, but also Office 365. So please join us if you're free next Thursday at 4 p.m. Geneva CET. So I just want to say a big thanks to all of our speakers, Tilman, Daniela, Liliana, Francesco for moderating. Also behind the scenes, it takes a village. We have Nivat, Ning, Namon, and Maria. Your feedback is so welcome on this session. At the end, you'll see a feedback form. Also, you can just email us at commons@un.org. And we hope to see you soon. So hopefully you'll join us next week. We'll see the doors of the library closing now. If you can't join us next week, hopefully another time. Take good care of yourselves and bye for now.